No matter what you're facing right now, there is one truth you must not forget. You are not alone. You are not abandoned. You are resting in the gracious hand of God, a hand that protects, provides, guides, and holds you secure.
Family, let me tell you something today. No matter what you're facing, no matter what's pressing down on you, there's one thing you cannot forget. You are living under the gracious hand of God. His hand is not weak. His hand is not absent, and his hand is never late. The same hand that created the heavens and the earth is the same hand that holds your life together right now. You may feel overwhelmed, but his hand is over you. You may feel forgotten, but his hand is guiding you. You may feel empty, but his hand is providing for you. When we talk about the protection of God's gracious hand, we are talking about something far greater than human strength, military defense, or even the safety measures we set up for ourselves. The protection of God is supernatural, invisible, and unstoppable. His hand covers his children in ways that we often do not recognize until we look back and realize how many things could have gone wrong, but didn't. His protection is not only about saving us from harm we can see, but also from dangers we may never become aware of. Countless times, God has shielded us from accidents, attacks, setbacks, and traps that the enemy had designed, and yet we walk forward unharmed. It is only by his covering that we stand here today. There are moments in life when we feel like the pressure is too much. When the storms of life beat against us, when enemies seem to surround us, and when the weight of responsibility threatens to break us. In those very moments, God's hand acts like a shield. The shield is not something that removes the battle, but something that covers you while you are in the middle of it. His hand does not always take away the storm, but it makes sure the storm does not destroy you. His hand does not always silence every enemy, but it ensures that their weapons do not prosper. His protection is not always the absence of struggle, but the assurance of survival. Sometimes people think they are standing strong because of their wisdom, their discipline, or their resilience. While those things matter, they are not the reason we make it through the darkest night. The reason we are still standing is that God has been holding us, shielding us, and covering us under his gracious hand. Think of the times you drove late at night and narrowly missed an accident, or the times you were delayed and later realized that delay kept you from danger, or the times you thought a closed door was rejection, but later discovered it saved you from unnecessary pain. Those are not coincidences. Those are the fingerprints of God's protection. An excellent example of this can be seen in the story of Daniel in the lion's den. Daniel was thrown into a pit filled with hungry lions, a situation designed to end his life immediately. By every human standard, he should not have survived. But all night long, God's hand was covering him, shutting the mouths of the lions, keeping him safe in a place of certain death. When the king came the next morning, Daniel was still alive, untouched, unharmed, because God's gracious hand had been his shield. That's the kind of protection God provides. He doesn't always remove the lion's den, but he makes sure the lions cannot touch you. In our modern lives, we may not be facing lions in a literal den, but we face lions in the form of financial struggles, health scares, betrayal, depression, or unexpected crises. Yet when we look back, we see evidence that the lions did not consume us. We are still here, still breathing, still moving forward, because the hand of God was over us. His protection doesn't mean we won't face trials, but it does mean we won't face them alone, and we won't be defeated by them. Every day that we wake up is a reminder that God's hand has shielded us from things seen and unseen. So whenever you feel surrounded or vulnerable, remind yourself of this truth. You are not here because of your own strength. You are here because God's gracious hand has been protecting you all along. When we speak about God's hand providing for us, we are acknowledging that he is the ultimate source of everything we need. Provision is not just about money, food, or material blessings. It is about God stepping into the places where we are empty and filling them with his abundance. His provision is complete. It touches our physical needs, our emotional gaps, our spiritual hunger, and even our relational longings. We often live under the illusion that our jobs, our skills, or our savings are what keep us afloat. While those things are tools, they are not the source. They are simply channels God uses, but His gracious hand is what ensures we never go without what is truly necessary for the season we are in. When the Israelites wandered in the wilderness, they had no farms, no businesses, no established economy, and no visible way to sustain millions of people. Yet every single day, God's hand provided manna from heaven and water from a rock. He did not give them a warehouse of food for years. Instead, He gave them daily bread to remind them that provision comes from Him, not from stockpiles. This shows us that sometimes God's provision does not come in the way we expect or on the timeline we prefer, but it always arrives exactly when we need it. His hand is never late, never insufficient, and never weak. Often our biggest struggle is not lack, but trust. We worry about tomorrow, about how the bills will be paid, how opportunities will come, or how healing will arrive. We stress over what we don't see, forgetting that the same God who has carried us this far has no intention of abandoning us now. Worry magnifies the problem, but faith magnifies the provider. God's hand knows how to place exactly what you need into your life, even if He has to use the most unlikely sources to do it. Provision is not limited by human systems or by what we think is possible. He can use a friend, a stranger, or even a closed door to lead us into greater supply than we imagine. Think of Elijah during the famine. There was no rain, no crops, and resources were drying up everywhere. Yet God instructed Elijah to go to a brook, and there He sent ravens to deliver bread and meat to him. Every morning and evening, when the brook dried up, God led him to a widow who, though poor, became a vessel of miraculous provision. This reminds us that God's hand is not bound by circumstances. When one source dries up, His hand opens another. His provision is not dependent on what you see, but on who He is. A short, modern example of this truth could be seen in a single mother struggling to provide for her children. Imagine her working long hours, sometimes unsure of how she will put dinner on the table. Yet at just the right time, a neighbor drops off groceries, or an unexpected check arrives in the mail, or a promotion opens up at work. She may have felt the weight of her lack, but God's hand made sure her children were fed, her bills were paid, and her household was sustained. These moments remind us that while we may not always understand the process, we can always trust the provider. God's hand providing for you means that you don't have to live in constant fear of running out. He may not always give you what you want, but He will always give you what you need. His supply is sufficient for today, and His promises guarantee hope for tomorrow. And you truly trust His hand, you stop panicking about scarcity and start resting in the assurance that you will never be forsaken. Provision is not about having everything, but about having enough, because the God who loves you has already made a way. When we speak about the guiding hand of God, we are talking about one of the most comforting truths in the life of a believer. Life is full of twists, turns, and unexpected detours. Often we set plans, chart our own courses, and expect everything to move in a straight line. But the reality is that nothing about life is that predictable. There are moments when we feel lost, moments when doors slam shut in our faces, and moments when paths we thought were guaranteed suddenly vanish. It is in those times that we must remember God's hand is never confused, never absent, and never misdirected. What may look like a dead end to us could very well be the exact route God is using to bring us into His perfect plan. The guiding hand of God is not just about pointing the way, it's about personally leading us step by step. Unlike a map that only gives direction, His hand is like a shepherd leading his sheep. He goes before us, clearing obstacles we cannot see, blocking roads that would harm us and opening paths that we didn't know existed. This is why the closed doors in our lives are just as important as the open ones. Sometimes we cry and complain over an opportunity that didn't work out or a plan that didn't unfold the way we wanted. But if we could see what God saw, we would thank him for his protection. The same hand that opens doors no one can shut is the same hand that shuts doors no one can open. Both are acts of grace. Guidance from God does not always make sense in the moment. It can feel frustrating when he tells us wait instead of go, or no instead of yes. But his perspective is higher than ours. He sees the full picture from beginning to end, while we only see the next step. To trust his guidance is to rest in the assurance that even when we don't understand the path, we can trust the hand that is leading us along it. His guidance is not only about reaching a destination, but about shaping us into the kind of people who can handle what he has prepared. An excellent example of God's guiding hand is found in the story of Joseph. As a young man, Joseph dreamed of greatness. Yet instead of going straight to the palace, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. To Joseph, those events must have felt like detours, painful, confusing, and unfair. But through it all, God's hand was guiding him. Each closed door was setting him up for a bigger open door. Had Joseph not been sold into Egypt, he would never have been in position to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Had he not been thrown into prison, he might never have crossed paths with the cupbearer who later opened the door to Pharaoh's court. What looked like detours were actually divine directions. In the end, Joseph rose to power and saved not only Egypt, but also his own family from famine. Looking back, Joseph was able to say to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." That is the guiding hand of God, turning what seems like missteps into the exact steps that lead to purpose. The same truth applies in our own lives. Perhaps you didn't get the job you prayed for, the relationship you hoped for, or the outcome you expected. At the time, it may feel like rejection, but in reality, it could be God's redirection. His hand is guiding you away from what could harm you and steering you toward what will bless you. The challenge is not to always understand the plan, but to trust the planner. When you realize his hand is guiding you, you no longer panic over detours because you know every step is divinely ordered. When life has a way of knocking us down, it often leaves us feeling like we may never rise again. Setbacks, failures, betrayals, illnesses, or disappointments can press us into the ground so heavily that it seems easier to stay there than to fight back. But here's the good news: the gracious hand of God never leaves his children in the dirt. He is the lifter of your head, the one who bends down to meet you at your lowest point and raises you up when you do not have the strength to stand on your own. His hand is not repelled by your weakness, your failures, or your tears. In fact, his strength is made perfect in those very moments when you feel the weakest. The lifting hand of God reminds us that our value is not determined by our mistakes, our losses, or our scars. Sometimes when life knocks us down, shame tries to convince us that we are unworthy of rising again. The enemy whispers that we are too broken, too flawed, or too far gone to be restored. But God's hand reaches into those places where hope has been buried and says, "You may be down, but you are not out. You may be weak, but I am strong. You may feel crushed, but I am the resurrection and the life." His lifting hand restores dignity where shame tried to strip it, gives hope where despair tried to settle, and brings courage where fear tried to dominate. Being lifted by God is not just about standing up physically. It is about being raised spiritually and emotionally. It is about having your heart renewed, your spirit encouraged, and your faith reignited. When his hand lifts you, he doesn't just pull you out of the pit. You come out with greater strength, deeper wisdom, and a stronger testimony. What looked like the end becomes the very beginning of something new because his lifting always carries purpose. Consider the story of Peter when he tried to walk on water. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he was able to do the impossible. But the moment he looked at the wind and the waves, fear overtook him and he began to sink. He was going under, drowning in his own doubt, when suddenly Jesus reached out his hand and lifted him up. Notice that Jesus didn't let Peter drown in his mistake. He didn't leave him in the water to figure it out himself. He reached down, pulled him up, and set him back on solid ground. That is what God's gracious hand does for us. It meets us in the middle of our failures and lifts us to a place of safety and restoration. In a modern example, think of someone who lost their job unexpectedly. They may have felt crushed, humiliated, and uncertain about the future. For weeks they struggled, wondering if they would ever find stability again. But in the midst of their despair, they found strength through prayer, encouragement from unexpected people, and eventually an opportunity for a new job, one better than the one they had lost. That was not coincidence. That was God's hand lifting them from the pit of hopelessness into a place of greater blessing. What looked like the end was only the setup for something better. So whenever you find yourself knocked down, do not assume you are meant to stay there. Call on the one whose hand is mighty to save. His lifting does not depend on how strong you are. It depends on how faithful he is, and he has never failed. When his hand lifts you, you rise with new confidence, not in yourself, but in the God who never leaves his children in the dirt. When we speak of God's hand holding us secure, we are talking about one of the greatest assurances of the Christian life. The world we live in is uncertain, unstable, and constantly shifting. Jobs are here today and gone tomorrow. Health can change in a moment. Relationships can rise and fall. And circumstances can swing like a pendulum without warning. Many people spend their lives grasping for something firm to hold on to. Yet everything they cling to eventually proves fragile. But when God holds you in his gracious hand, you are safe, steady, and unshakable. No matter what storms may rage around you, his grip is not weak or inconsistent. It is powerful, unbreakable, and eternal. The security of God's hand means that nothing in creation has the authority to snatch you away from his care. Trials may come, enemies may plot, and even your own fears may whisper otherwise, but his grip does not loosen because of your circumstances. What God has spoken over your life will surely come to pass because his hand not only holds you, it also guards his promises concerning you. Sometimes we imagine that the weight of holding on to God rests on us, like we must cling with all our might in order to remain safe. But the truth is, it's not our weak hands holding him, it is his mighty hand holding us. Even when our grip slips in moments of weakness, his never does. There are times when life feels like an earthquake shaking everything beneath us. Our emotions fluctuate, our faith feels fragile, and we wonder if we'll collapse under the pressure. Yet in the middle of instability, God becomes our anchor. His hand keeps us from drifting into despair, from being swept away by fear, or from being destroyed by the attacks of the enemy. The fact that you are still standing today is proof that his secure hand has kept you when everything else tried to break you. A short but excellent example of this truth can be seen in the life of Job. Job's entire world collapsed. He lost his wealth, his children, his health, and even the support of those closest to him. By human standards, his situation was hopeless, and he had every reason to believe that his life was over. Yet through all of his suffering, Job was still held in the hand of God. Though Satan tried to destroy him, he could not take Job out of God's grip. In the end, Job's life was restored, and he came out stronger and more blessed than before. What this shows us is that being secure in God's hand does not mean we will never experience pain or loss, but it does mean that pain and loss will never have the final word. We can also see this truth in modern life. Imagine a person going through the chaos of losing a business they worked years to build. At first, it feels like their identity, stability, and future have been ripped away. But as days turn into weeks, they begin to see God's provision in unexpected ways. Opportunities open, relationships strengthen, and they discover that their worth and future were never tied to the business. They were always secure in God's plan. That business may have crumbled, but their life remained steady because God's hand held them through it all. This is the kind of security we have in God. It is not based on feelings, circumstances, or even our ability to remain strong. It is based solely on His faithfulness. His hand guarantees that nothing can cancel His purpose for your life. When you know that God is holding you, you don't have to fear tomorrow, because the one who holds you also holds the future. You don't have to live in anxiety because you are anchored in the unshakable hand of a gracious God. And that is the strongest security you will ever need. So today, stop focusing on the storm and start focusing on the hand that calms it. Stop worrying about who left you and start rejoicing in the one who holds you. His gracious hand is on your life, and that means goodness is on your path, favor is in your future, and victory is already yours. Don't let fear talk louder than faith. Don't let the enemy tell you God has forgotten you.
Thank you for joining us on this spiritual journey. If this message touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more reflections that nourish the soul. Your presence here means so much. Come back soon. And let's continue to explore faith and meaning together.
Look at your life and declare with confidence, I am covered.
Thank you for joining us on this spiritual journey. If this message touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with more reflections that nourish the soul. Your presence here means so much. Come back soon. And let's continue to explore faith and meaning together.
I am kept. I am carried by God's gracious hand.